Sun dipped behind the skeletal oaks that crowned the ridgeline, painting the sky in bruised purples and bloodshot reds. Frost stiffened the long grasses in the pasture below, each blade glinting like splintered glass beneath a waning light. On the edge of a weathered corral, Claire McAllister pressed her thin fingers to the rough-hewn rail. Her brother, Jacob, no older than 10, lay huddled beside a rusted trough, ribs visible beneath a threadbare shirt. Each hushed breath heaved in shallow struggle. Claire's chest constricted at the sight. Hunger had hollowed him to a wisp of bone and sorrow, yet his pale eyes burned with fierce trust. Tonight, Claire would do what she must. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've got something extra special saved just for you. The McAllister Ranch stood abandoned by all but memories. Once a thriving spread, it now sagged beneath a roof of curling shingles and wind-ripped canvas. Inside the main cabin, varnish peeled from the floorboards, and hearthstones lay cold as river rocks. Claire had tried to light a fire twice that day, using driftwood scavenged in the creek bed, but the wind snatched her sparks. She settled instead for a battered skillet over a low cooking stove, boiling what little water remained. Each spoonful of scalding broth burned her throat, but Jacob took every drop. Claire watched him swallow, her own hunger eclipsed by relief. Beyond the creek, the black silhouette of the Barrow Ranch rose like a fortress against the open plain. Its lights glimmered where Claire's father had once broken horses and stacked hay. Since his death to fever 3 winters past, the Barrow place fell to disrepair and whispering rumors. Now, creditors bayed at its heels, and raiders drifted through Barrow's barns like vultures. But it was the richest homestead within 30 miles, food, livestock, heirloom seed, clutching hope like a dying ember in Claire's bruised heart. To take any risk meant risking everything. Their lives, their scant dignity, their last ties to family honor. Claire crouched beside Jacob and tested the span of her resolve. The air stung her lungs with frost and despair. She brushed damp hair from Jacob's forehead. "Stay here," she whispered, voice as fragile as ice. He blinked, too tired for questions. His small fist closed around her thumb, a silent plea. Claire tore her gaze away, stepping toward the corral gate. Her legs trembled beneath the weight of fear. One desperate act might save Jacob, or cost both their lives. In that moment, grief and ferocity coiled within her like twin cobras. She gingerly unhooked the latch and slipped into the twilight. Meanwhile, half a mile up the lane, Sam Wheeler paused at the fence's bend. The grieving rancher's breath puffed clouds in the cold dusk. He rubbed a wool glove across his cheek, feeling stubble beneath calluses hardened by loss. Widowhood had settled on him 2 years earlier, when cholera struck his wife and infant together. Since, he'd buried every remnant of joy beneath hours of bucking steers and tending frost-stiff fields. His pride lay in the barn's neat rows of stalls, the crisp lines of his fence posts, once proud as church steeples. Now barns sagged, fences rotted, and hope flickered like a half-orphaned candle. Sam's lantern cast an orange glow across the empty paddock. He knelt to inspect a broken rail. Fresh splinter marks spoke of late-night trespassers, raiders or desperate families. He did not know. Each crack in his fence was a wound in his chest. He traced the grain of the rail with thick fingers. This land was all he had left of a life once full of laughter. He exhaled to disperse frost from his coat collar and rose, shoulders squared. He would repair this rail tomorrow, come what may. But first, supper, if there was enough food to call it that. Claire skirted the shadow corral and crept toward Sam's back gate. Her boots, stolen from her pa's closet, slipped across frozen churned earth. Heart thundered in chest like a runaway horse. Claire paused at the lantern light spilling from Sam's kitchen window. She peered inside. Cast-iron skillets sizzled over with stove. The air shimmered with the scent of bacon and black-eyed peas. Jacob's lean body ached for sustenance. Every step forward imprinted hunger and hope deeper into Claire's bones. Inside, Sam set out plates on a worn pine table. He placed biscuits in a tin pan and poured syrup from a chipped crock. His fingers faltered as he reached for a jar of preserves, running low on jam for the children of the town when they came begging. He hesitated, thumb brushing the lid. A father's instinct warred with his grief. Should he spare a scrap for strangers when the next frost could take what little remained? Before he answered, a faint sound scraped his ear, with shifting a soft footfall. Sam's spine stiffened. He reached for his rifle, heart dodging between dread and duty. Claire's shadow slipped against the doorframe. Sam froze, lantern in hand, blade of light slicing the dim. Claire stumbled forward, raising both hands, empty but urgent. Behind her, Jacob emerged, crouching in borrowed coat sleeves. His face wore the ghost of hunger, but also fierce gratitude. Sam's wind-burned eyes narrowed. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice low as whiskey at dawn. Claire's throat ached. She swallowed, then spoke across the tumble of her fear. "Please, my brother." She unbuttoned her coat, revealing a thin frame hewn by starvation. "I have nothing left but—" Her voice cracked. She looked at Jacob. "I'll work. Anything, just feed him." Silence swelled like a gathering storm. Sam's jaw clenched, wiping a palm across his coat lapel. He studied Claire's pale face, her hair knotted, her eyes hollow but defiant. Jacob shifted on the threshold, small body quivering. Sam's grief for his wife and child rallied in his chest. He could not bear another dying soul at his gate. Anger, pity, and memory warred within him. Finally, he lowered the rifle. "Come inside," he rasped. "We'll see what there is to eat." Claire's heartbeat thumped in her ears as she stepped across the threshold, the warmth of the cabin washing over her like a benediction. Inside, the stove's glow banished the cold. Claire guided Jacob to a chair, settling him gently. Sam retrieved a rough wooden spoon and dipped into ham-fat beans, then coaxed Claire to sit and share a biscuit. The meal was humble, but Claire tasted salvation in every bite. Jacob took a bite, cheeks hollowing, eyes brightening in disbelief. Sam watched them with guarded hope, turning the meal into an offering of his soul. Outside, wind gnawed at the cabin logs, and shadows whispered of creditors and drifters. But for this moment, the three were united by a simple truth. In giving food, Sam had given them more than bread. He had given them family. As the lantern flickered low, Claire met Sam's steady gaze. Both felt the flicker of something stronger than hunger, trust. Yet beyond the window, the prairie lay open and unforgiving. Tomorrow, fences would need mending, creditors would call, and raiders might come. Claire pressed her hand against Jacob's back, steeling herself for what lay ahead. Sam placed a fresh biscuit on Jacob's plate, then closed the cabinet door on his preserves. Hunger, grief, and hope settled around the table like ghosts. In the quiet stir of their ragged breaths, each knew that sacrifice had forged a fragile bond, one that would face the cruel dawn together. At dawn's gray edge, Claire McAllister stirred beneath a patched quilt. Frost clung to window panes in filigree lace, and the cabin air tasted of smoke and lingering ash. Through the crack in the door, pale light spilled onto the rough plank floor. Jacob lay curled against a coil of blankets, his breath soft as a breeze through cottonwood leaves. Claire eased upright, every muscle complaining beneath threadbare shift. Outside, the barn's roof sagged under the early chill, and a lone crow rasped for warmth. She pressed a hand to her rib cage, aching from last night's vigil, and slipped from the bed. Sam Wheeler stood at the hearth before the kettle, stirring steel-gray embers with a length of iron. His lantern cast a halo around him, sharpening shadows on his worn features. When he spoke, his voice jolted Claire like cold spurs against flesh. "Coffee will be ready in a moment," he said, palms turned to the stove warmth. Each movement carried weight. The slow drag of grief had settled in his bones since his wife's fever stole her smile and their infant's first cry. In that hush, he laid aside sorrow for duty, feeding newcomers with the one thing left in his world, compassion. Claire filled a battered tin cup at a corner pump, water cold as memory. She balanced it in Jacob's small hands, guiding him to the hearth. In the glow, he sipped hot broth Sam ladled, broth glinting with bacon fat. Claire watched pacified relief ease the hollow in Jacob's cheeks. His eyes, once dull with hopelessness, flickered with something she dared call hope. She pressed a fingertip to his hairline, brushing damp strands aside. Then she reached for her gloves, stepping into the dawn air to begin chores. Frost stiffened the long grasses in the pasture as Claire trudged toward the corral. Each rail she passed needed repair. Splintered propped by thin rope, posts leaning like weary pilgrims. She set to work with hands steady despite numb fingers. Each knot she tied was a vow. To protect Jacob, to repay Sam's kindness. In the far corner, a gate hung by one hinge. She lifted it and reset the bolt. The hinges groaned, as if weary from neglect. Above her, the sky bled pale pink. The ranch seemed to exhale in relief at her small triumph. From inside the cabin came the scrape of chair legs. Sam emerged, carrying a threadbare coat he'd found drying by the hearth. He draped it over Claire's shoulders, its patched elbow and faded lining a gift of warmth. "You earned some cover," he said quietly. His eyes lingered on the clean lines of her jaw, the weary set of her shoulders. He bore his own scars, jagged grief he seldom spoke of. But in that moment he gave more than cloth. He offered homage to her courage, a silent pledge to stand between her and the world's cruelty. Claire paused, mind drifting back months earlier, when fever claimed her mother and father within a single week. She had carried Jacob across the same plain, guiding him by the hand until exhaustion forced her into a tumble of tears beneath mesquite shade. Now, that memory stung less with fear and more with pride. They had survived. She braced against the wind, facing the sun climbing behind the ridges, willing herself into the present where sanctuaries were granted by strange mercy. Inside, Sam tended a skillet of cornmeal cakes, steam rising like morning mist over the stove. He flipped each cake with care, listening to the brittle hiss. His wife had once shared this task, her laughter ringing like church bells through the room. He paused, spatula curling grease back into the pan, and swallowed. Then he flung open the cabin door and called, "Breakfast," voice firm as a promise. Claire hoisted Jacob over the rail. He landed with soft thump and followed her inside, around the table. Claire slid onto a split-log bench beside Jacob. Sam placed cakes on tin plates and poured sorghum syrup in a chipped saucer. Claire drizzled thick sweetness over golden rounds and handed one to Jacob, who bit with eager jaw that cracked syrup at the corners of his mouth. Sam watched, chest tight with a strange warmth that edged hope and fear into his ribs. He poured a second cup of coffee and held out to Claire, bitter truth in every sip. She accepted it, letting its burn carve courage beneath her ribs. After breakfast, Sam led Claire to the tack room where saddles hung on wooden pegs like silent sentinels. He produced a coil of leather thongs and iron rivets. "We need this fence mended by sundown," he said, tossing a length of harness to Claire. Jacob trotted after them, curiosity tactful behind clouded eyes. Claire picked up the thongs, studying the worn leather. Each crack was a road traveled, a memory sketched in grain. She set to work lacing straps through buckles, her fingers learning new rhythms beneath Sam's watchful gaze. In the midday hush, a wagon creaked onto the road, slats wood groaning under unseen weight. Claire looked up as Mrs. Delaney, the town storekeeper, emerged with a burlap sack. Her leather boots crunched frost-laden earth, and her bonnet's ribbon fluttered like a broken promise. She offered the sack to Sam and Claire. "Flour and salt," she said. "Thought you might need it." Her eyes flicked to Jacob, then to Claire. "Suppliers hit by bandits last week. You watch the ridge." She tapped her temple, and then a ledger bound in cracked leather. Rooker's note came through. 2 weeks to settle or he'll foreclose at sundown. The word foreclosure fell like a stone in Claire's belly. Jacob's small hand gripped her apron. She knelt and wrapped both siblings in her arms, tasting salt on her cheek. Sam laid a heavy hand on Claire's shoulder. "We'll find a way," he said, voice low as raven's wings. His gaze hardened with the weight of responsibility. "They won't take this place while I draw breath." A low rumble carried on the wind, the distant roll of hooves. All three froze, eyes on the horizon where dust wreathed the prairies like a gathering storm. Claire's pulse faltered as shapes emerged, riders in tatters, faces veiled by kerchiefs, brandishing rifles and levers. Raiders had come for easy pickings. Jacob's grip tightened, knuckles white on Claire's shift. Sam reached for his rifle, pulling it from its peg with methodical calm. Claire rose, brushing flour dust from her skirt, mind whirring between fear and fierce determination. Mrs. Delaney lifted her bonnet and hurried back to her wagon, tossing over more supplies, a lantern, candles, an iron skillet. "Use them well," she called, mounting with a spring that belied her age. Her eyes held a blend of pity and respect as she urged the wagon forward, creaking away down the lane. In the sudden quiet, horses pawed the ground beyond the fence. Their riders exchanged voices too distant to parse, but clear in menace. Sam lined up a clean bullet in his chamber and slid the rifles but against his shoulder. Claire slid beside him, heart hammered like anvil on steel. Jacob scooted behind them, fear flickering in his wide eyes. The threat loomed, a noonday reckoning. Claire glanced at Sam, seeing resolve carved in lines around his eyes and mouth. She swallowed her fear and whispered, "We protect the ranch." Sam nodded once, stiff as a drawn bowstring. In that moment, the past and future converged, grief, sacrifice, and hope braided into a vow beneath ice sky. Wolves might howl at the rising wind, and creditors might circle like scavengers, but today the McAllisters and Wheeler would stand together against the dangers of the frontier. As the first rider crossed the fence line, Claire tightened her grip on Jacob's hand, the gunmetal of Sam's rifle glinting in the pale light, ready for whatever would come next. The first echo of hoofbeats fell across the frostbitten pasture like distant thunder. Sam Wheeler's rifle barked once, a crisp report that shredded the noon hush and sent three raiders sprawling over the corral rail. Claire McAllister pressed Jacob to her side, heart pounding beneath her patched shirt. A second report cut through the air, and the men, ragged silhouettes framed in dust, spun their mounts and fled toward open plains. Claire exhaled, breath pluming in cold air. She smoothed her shift and met Sam's steady gaze. In those dark eyes she saw fierce relief and raw sorrow. He had drawn a line through grief to stand between them and harm. Jacob's small hand curled around hers, tethering her to purpose. Inside, Sam set the rifle aside on a rack above the stove and cradled a tin mug of coffee. The bitter warmth chased adrenaline's chill through his chest. He handed the cup to Claire, catching her in his steady gaze. Her eyes, wide with relief and lingering fear, met his for a heartbeat before she nodded. In that moment, grief-pocked memories surfaced. 2 years spent burying Ellie and infant Samuel to fever's cruel grip. He had thought his capacity for loss exhausted, but compassion rose within him like sap in spring. He offered the mug again, and Claire accepted, drawing courage from its burn. Outside, the sky held promise of colder nights, but within the cabin a fragile warmth took root. At the hearth, Jacob perched on a stool, clutching a bowl of porridge Sam ladled with care. Claire knelt beside him, brushing crumbs from his chin. His cheeks, hollow yesterday, were filling with life. He raised his eyes, a question there, soft but daring, and smiled as he took another spoonful. Claire's chest ached with hope. She pressed a finger to his forehead. "Better every day," she murmured. The flicker of the oil lantern danced across his hair, golden highlights, stirring memories of her mother's gentle hands. Jacob's hand slipped into hers, forging a silent pact between them that glowed brighter than any hearth fire. Later, Sam found Claire repairing the corral fence under an afternoon sky tinted pink. Each stroke of her hammer fell with quiet determination. He brought fresh planks and nails, watching as she tied rope around a post. Knots as intricate as her resolve. "My pa built this fence," Claire said, voice low as mesquite wind. He said it kept out wolves and debt collectors. Sam's throat tightened. He remembered Ellie's humming as she gathered eggs at dawn, her laughter drifting on cool air. He planted a plank in place and said, "Well, keep it standing." Together they sealed splintered wood and fraying rope, stitching safety into every board. Under her hands, the corral became a vow carved in grain. By dusk, Mrs. Delaney creaked down the lane in her buckboard cart. Her lantern glimmered like a guardian star as she brought fresh eggs and a sack of dried beans, lifelines in a lean world. In Sam's callous hand, she placed a folded note. Rooker and Sons demanded payment within 3 days, or the ranch would pass into their ledger. She offered a battered tin cup. "Coffee, Sam," she said. Her eyes lingered on Claire and Jacob, soft with empathy. These children won't be left out in the cold. Then she climbed aboard, and the cart creaked away down the dusk-laden road, leaving behind hope forged in flour and small-grained kindness. In the cabin's glow, Claire cracked eggs into the skillet, shells clattering against hot iron. Jacob stood on a crate to stir beans with a spoon salvaged from last night's dinner. The room filled with steam, air sweet with promise. Sam stood by the stove, photograph in hand, his wife and infant smiling in a softer time. He traced their faces with a finger worn smooth by memory. "They'd have liked you both," he said. Claire lifted a plate of eggs and placed it before Jacob, whose smile bloomed like sunrise. Sam served Mrs. Delaney's coffee, hands steady with purpose. That humble supper became a feast, nourishment for bodies and battered souls alike. As twilight deepened, 2 figures emerged at the fence line. Lantern glimmer revealed men in tarnished coats, carrying ledgers and iron clamps for sealing documents. Their horses stamped impatiently, breath steaming in the chill. The taller man flipped open his ledger and read in a measured voice, "Ranch belongs to Rooker and Sons at sundown unless payment is made." Claire's pulse thundered. Jacob's face drained of color. Sam advanced, shoulders square like a bowstring. He met the creditor's gaze. "There's no payment," he said, voice low as wind through canyon. "But I'll work until every dollar is earned." The creditor snapped the ledger shut and pocketed a pre-signed deed. 2 days, he said, voice flat as a tombstone. "Take it or leave it." He turned his lantern, its beams slicing long shadows behind him. Mrs. Delaney stepped from the shadows, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Show mercy," she pleaded. He hesitated, jaw clenched, then mounted his horse without another word. The wheels of the buckboard creaked as it rolled away, leaving them to breathe again in the gathering dark. Claire closed the cabin door against the cold and stood with Sam in the flickering lantern light. Jacob leaned against her legs, eyes heavy with unshed tears. Sam drew a worn map from his coat pocket, scrawled routes to neighboring towns. "We'll ride tomorrow," he said, voice rough with determination. "I'll see Rooker in town." Claire squeezed Jacob's hand, feeling the quilt's patchwork warmth. "I'll go with you," she whispered, courage threading through her words. Sam's brows lifted, surprise and respect mixing in his gaze. He nodded, resting a hand on her shoulder, an anchor in a world adrift. At first light, Sam stood atop a hill overlooking the ranch, a leather holster fitted over his worn coat, and a saddlebag packed with provisions. Claire adjusted the strap of her father's old pistol belt, each notch worn by past labors. Jacob stood at the corral rail, waving a thin scarf in hope and fear. Sam tipped his hat to Claire, who mounted beside him, resolve shining in her eyes like morning dew. They rode toward the rising sun, hooves crunching frost and dreams alike beneath them. The distant silhouette of Rooker's men appeared on the ridge, weapons slung, but voices muted. Claire's hand tightened on her pistol grip as they approached their reckoning. 2 days to save a homeborn of mercy and sacrifice. At dawn's pale edge, Sam Wheeler and Claire McAllister rode out along the dust-choked trail, leaving Jacob in Mrs. Delaney's care. Frost still clung to the dry grasses. Every hoofbeat sent tiny clouds of dust dancing in the cool air. Claire's scarf, her mother's handiwork, fluttered like a pale flag of hope. Behind them, The weathered ranch lay silent beneath a low sky. Sam guided his mount with quiet purpose, eyes fixed on the winding road to town. In his chest, grief and determination warred like two horses in a stall. He bore the weight of Ellie's memory and the new promise of these children's safety. Claire trailed close, hand brushing Sam's saddle horn as they passed sun-bleached fence posts. He said nothing, but the set of his shoulders spoke volumes. She adjusted the brim of his hat, where a night's wind had knocked it askew. The simple act steadied them both, her small attempt to shelter him as he'd sheltered Jacob. Sam cast a glance back toward the ranch, where a plume of smoke marked the cook stove's first fire. He'd left word for Mrs. Delaney to send help if trouble came. Still, his heart pounded at every twist in the trail, every stir of crows along the fence line. Claire's mind drifted to the year her parents died. She saw their faces through a haze of fever and tears, felt the merciless creditors pounding at their door, men in black coats and cold eyes who'd seized the homestead by noon. Her father had begged him for time. Her mother had held Jacob to her breast, whispering promises of escape. Claire had led them into the scrub oak, clutching Jacob's hand, running until their lungs burned. The memory surged now as both warning and weapon. She would not let another creditor's pen ruin these lives. She stiffened in her saddle, resolve sharpening like a new blade. By mid-morning, the single-street town emerged from sun-bleached dust. Boardwalks sagged beneath awnings. Saloon doors creaked to an empty half-swing, and a lone blacksmith hammered sparks in the sky. Claire inhaled the scent of leather and horse-sweet hay, feeling her pulse quicken. At the general store, Rooker and Sons' ledger was posted in the window, names scrawled like gravestones. She swallowed fear as they dismounted before a narrow door marked Rooker and Sons, Loans and Claims. Sam paused, pressing a knuckle to his jaw. Then he nodded once, firm as a church bell, and led Claire inside. The office's single window slanted harsh light across a desk stacked with musty ledgers and sharpened pencils. Behind it sat Mr. Rooker, a tall, gaunt man whose eyes glinted like tarnished silver. He stood as they entered, palms folded atop a leather-bound deed. His thin lips curved in something like feigned welcome. "Mr. Wheeler," he said, voice dry as winter straw. "Miss McAllister. Pleasant surprise." He tapped the ledger. "You have 2 days to settle your account, no exceptions. After that, I take possession." The words landed like stones in Sam's chest. Sam drew a breath, heart rumbling like distant thunder. "I asked for 3 days, Rooker. I'll pay every cent." His voice held resolve, tempered by grief. 2 years of loss carved into each syllable. Rooker's lip curled. "Terms are terms, Wheeler. These debts don't sleep." He turned to the ledger and flipped a page. "I've made allowances already." Claire stepped forward. Her voice, small but fierce, filled the silent room. "Please, sir, we're working every hour. Mr. Wheeler's children." Rooker silenced her with a lift of his hand. "Business isn't charity, girl." He leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Pray you don't test my patience." Claire felt Sam's hand brush the butt of his pistol at his side. Subtle yet certain. A soft knock turned their gaze to the door, where Sheriff Amos Trent stood in the frame. His badge caught lantern glow, like a sliver of promise. "Morning, folks," he said, tone neutral but kind. "Heard you might need a hand." He held out a folded writ stamped with the town council seal, an extension petition granting 1 more day to pay. Claire's breath caught. Sam's eyes brightened. Rooker glanced at the paper, then at Trent. With a sudden flick, he tore the writ in two. "Pointless," he muttered. "No more time." The sheriff's jaw clenched. "Be careful, Rooker." His voice was thundered warning, steel-edged with regret. Rooker stood, shoulders straight, and offered no reply. Sheriff Trent backed away, closing the door with a hollow click that echoed in the room like a verdict. Sam squared his shoulders. "You leave us no choice," he said quietly. "We'll see you at sunset." He tipped his hat and motioned to Claire. She nodded, lips set in a line of determination. Together, they stepped out into the dusty street. leaving Rooker's scowl lingering in the doorway. As they approached their horses, Mrs. Delaney's buckboard creaked around the corral fence. Her lantern light bobbed ahead. She held out a small parcel, 3 fresh loaves of oat bread, and a jar of salted pork. "For the night," she said softly, meeting Claire's gaze. "Ride safe." Claire clasped her hand in gratitude. Sam offered a curt nod. Mrs. Delaney climbed aboard and urged the horses back down the trail, disappearing into the haze of late afternoon. Claire mounted beside Sam, chest tight with worry for Jacob and the ranch. She felt the rough leather of her father's pistol belt settling at her hip, a weight of both burden and protection. Sam settled his saddle and flicked a glance at her. "Let's ride," he said. His voice was calm as creek water, but Claire heard the undertow of fear and fierce love. They urged their mount along the return road, sun lowered and shadows lengthening across the fields. Each hoofbeat sounded like an omen. Sam rode ahead, scanning the horizon for trouble, while Claire followed, mind pinned between hope and dread. She squeezed the pistol at her side, recalling the thud of Sam's warning shot that had scattered the raiders. That single crack of gunfire had become a promise. No harm would come to these children on his watch. Just as the first star trembled above the eastern ridges, a rider galloped up the trail toward them, dust flaring in his wake. Sam tensed. Claire's heart stalled. The rider reined in close and tossed aside the brim of his hat. It was young Tom Hayes, the neighbor's boy, sweat streaking his face. "Mr. Wheeler," he gasped, voice raw. Claire slid from her saddle, heart skewered by dread. Sam hurried forward, hand on Tom's shoulder. "What is it?" he demanded. Tom swallowed, throat bobbing. "Ranch, they're back. Raiders at the corral. Cut the fence, spooked the stock. Jacob's alone with Mrs. Delaney." His eyes darted between them. "They've taken the bread and pork. I barely got away." The world narrowed for Claire. She felt cold air suck every breath from her lungs. Jacob, alone, defenseless, her brother, the child she'd given everything for. Sam's hand found Claire's shoulder, grounding her in a storm of fear and fury. He lifted his rifle from its scabbard as Tom backed away. Claire's boots scuffed the prairie dust. Every instinct she had screamed to turn and ride. Sam's voice was steel. "Tom, get back to camp. Tell Delaney we'll be there soon." Tom nodded and galloped off toward the fading sun. Claire remounted with trembling legs, pistol clenched like a lifeline. Sam swung into his own saddle, eyes hard with purpose. Claire swallowed the taste of fear and steeled herself for the fight to come. Side by side, they spurred their mounts down the trail, each hoofbeat a promise. Today they would stand for family, for home. Raiders or creditors, no force on God's earth would break their bond. And as the ridge drew near, the sky burned rose and gold, as if heralding the reckoning at the corral. A storm born of desperation, unwavering love, and resolve sharpened by 2 lost souls turned guardians. Roaring wind whipped dust across the corral as Sam Wheeler and Claire McAllister burst through the gate. Hoofbeats thundered behind them, and Claire spotted shadows flitting among splintered fence posts where raiders had cut through earlier. Panic propelled her forward. Jacob's small shape crouched beside a feed trough, eyes wide as the barrel of Sam's rifle. 2 raiders lunged for the last of the stolen flour sacks. Claire raised her pistol and fired a warning round into the corral's beams. The crack of powder snapped like a whip. The men froze, then ducked behind rails. Sam charged, rifle leveled, voice low and fierce. "Back off or face the law." Raiders weighed their options. High sun glinted on Rooker's men riding up the road, a fresh threat emerging in tandem with the bandits. Claire touched Jacob's shoulder, voice steady. "We stand together." Jacob nodded, trembling, clutching his patched scarf. In that charged air, the final stand for family and home ignited. Sam moved swiftly, corralling the raiders behind him with unflinching determination. They whispered threats, but his steady gaze and the pistol at his hip spoke louder. Claire circled around the fence's gap, gathering splinter boards and looping rawhide thongs around broken posts. Jacob stood close, eyes shining with fierce admiration for the pair who had saved him. A young raider crept toward the open barn, hands raised to snatch a sack of corn. Claire barked his name, startling him. He froze, shovel clunking at his feet. Sam raised his rifle, not to kill, but to show the rule of law still held on this dusty frontier. The raiders realized mercy was stranger than violence and slipped away into the haze. Sam lowered his weapon, bending to meet Claire's gaze. "You did good," he said quietly. Claire exhaled tension she did not know she'd held, and lifted Jacob into her arms. The corral stood mended, however briefly, another promise in a fragile world. With the raiders gone, Sam and Claire turned to Rooker's looming threat. Inside the cabin, the ledger lay open on the pine table, its pages dripping demands. Sam dipped a quill pen into ink and scrawled a note to Sheriff Trent, requesting formal filing of the foreclosure papers. Claire watched, hands clasped around a tin mug of coffee stained by flour dust. Jacob peeked from behind her skirt, curiosity brimming. A distant hoofbeat echoed. Sheriff Trent patrol returning with townsfolk in tow. Mrs. Delaney marched beside the sheriff, carrying 2 sacks of seed corn donated by neighbors. Their expressions were resolute. Trent tipped his hat and placed the sacks on the table. "Community petition," he said. "They've signed to help cover your debt. Everyone pitched in." Sam's chest constricted at the sight of support from faces weathered by the same frontier trials. Claire's eyes brimmed as she looked at Jacob, then at Sam. For the first time, the ranch felt more than survival. It felt belonging. Night fell in a hush of embers and creaking timber. Sam tended the wood stove, adding kindling until the warmth chased back the chill. Claire wrapped Jacob in her mother's scarf, its patches testament to past hardships bound together. She tucked a carved wooden horse, her father's gift, into Jacob's shirt pocket as a keepsake. Sam watched quietly, memories flickering like coals. Ellie's laugh in the kitchen, baby Samuel's first steps across a ragged rug. The void those memories left had softened now, filling with new hope. Outside, the wind whispered through scorched cornstalks, a reminder of Rooker's looming deadline. Claire met Sam's gaze and said softly, "We have tomorrow." He nodded, lifting his coffee mug in silent toast. Jacob yawned beside the stove, eyelids heavy with safety. In the flicker of lantern light, their chosen family closed ranks against the coming storm, bound by shared sacrifice and the promise of a new dawn. Morning revealed splintered board and hoof prints etched in powdery frost. Rooker's riders lingered near the gate, rifles slung but caution in their posture. Claire led Jacob forward, horse's bridle wrapped in Mrs. Delaney's colorful ribbon. Sam emerged from the barn, clutching a chain of hay bales tied with rough twine. He approached the creditor's men, offering the feed as barter. "Take this and go," he said, voice steady. "Enough for your horses and mine, but leave the ranch be." Rooker's lieutenant spat on the ground, but the men eyed the chain of hay as a precious resource against starvation. Trent stepped from the corral's shade, badge gleaming. "You'll accept this," he stated, handing a ledger filled with neighbor contributions. Faces from every homestead were scrawled in ink. Rooker's lips thinned. He studied their resolve. A gust rattled barn doors. At last, he snapped the ledger shut. "You've bought your time," he conceded, "but I'll collect interest when the war is over." Relief bloomed like sunrise across Sam's face. That evening, Mrs. Delaney and Sheriff Trent joined them around the stove. Trent produced a handful of gold coins, his savings for frontier families in need, and pressed them into Sam's palm. Mrs. Delaney offered hot coffee and warm bread, steam curling like prayer over rough-hewn boards. Tom Hayes, eyes bright, presented a carved stool he'd made from oak, sturdy enough for Jacob to reach the table. Claire traced the wood's grain, seeing her father's craftsmanship in every notch. Sam's jaw softened as he accepted these tokens of solidarity. In that moment, the cabin became a hearth of community rather than isolation. Jacob climbed onto his new stool, holding Tom's gift like a talisman. As lantern light flickered, Each ally's gesture affirmed the ranch's place in a tapestry of shared hardship and hope. In the hush that followed, Claire reached into her satchel and withdrew a tarnished locket, her mother's. She unclasped it gently and let Jacob peer inside at a faded photograph of their family. His small hand closed around the chain, eyes wide with awe. Sam produced a worn horseshoe, Ellie's favorite talisman against misfortune, from his coat pocket and laid it beside the locket on the table. He turned the U-shape toward them, whispering, "Good luck follows family." Claire and Jacob exchanged glances, both comforted by these relics of love and loss. Outside, the wind settled, and the howl of coyotes was replaced by the rhythm of community. In that simple moment, their bond crystallized. They were no longer two orphans and a grieving rancher, but family forged by mercy and bound by ties. Dawn broke on renewed promise. The three of them, Sam, Claire, and Jacob, stepped onto the frosted pasture and knelt beside a row of tilled earth. Sam pressed a handful of corn seed into Claire's palm, and she tucked each kernel into the ground with gentle care. Jacob scattered seeds of wild sunflower behind them, petals closed in dawn's hush. The early sun painted their breath in gold. Beside the fence, Tom Hayes hammered in new boards. Claire smoothed her hand over the earth, feeling its warm pulse. Sam rested his hand on her shoulder and whispered, "We're home." Jacob took his first handful of soil, raising it like treasure. As hammers ticked and water fell, their laughter rose to meet the morning light, a testament to love, resilience, and a family bound by choice.